Hello and welcome to my capstone poster presentation on trauma-informed care and promoting safety, rehabilitation, and occupational performance through the juvenile justice facilities. So my capstone began with a systematic review where I focused on identifying and applying trauma-informed care evidence-based practice to the needs of juvenile justice-involved youth to promote safety, rehabilitation, and occupational performance. So 6 interventions were identified through this literature, and within those 6 interventions, 13 overlapping principles were extracted. Those included safety, rapport, stabilizing and maximizing brain stages, developing self-regulation skills, being consistent, and so forth. So the recommendations in the literature were applied to the rest of my capstone. My doctoral experience itself was through ABC Therapies Incorporated at 2 of their contracted sites, Circleville Juvenile Correctional Facility and Franklin County Juvenile Detention Facility. At these sites, I was responsible for treating and evaluating individuals and groups in addition to working to on-site projects. These projects included things such as developing population-specific sensory screening tools, creating sensory preparatory activity guides within facility restrictions, and guest lecturing with a Xavier OT class on occupational justice in the justice system, just to name a few of those. I also spent a significant amount of my time working on my capstone project itself, working on implementing evidence-based trauma-informed care strategies found in my literature to the site itself. So I aim to do this through a proposed trauma-informed care training protocol, along with data collection with staff directly. The methods were frequently adapted due to rescheduling, time constraints, the approval process itself, and the needs of the site, as those were ever changing. However, I was still able to meet the objectives of this study. And so through all of that, I was able to get a lot of staff feedback on what their knowledge was, what they lacked, and what they needed in order to increase their trauma-informed care use in their day-to-day roles. And so I provided recommendations to administration within each of the facilities themselves. And it came down to 3 components that were really needed to be facility-wide trauma-informed. And so the first one being increasing advocacy and collaboration in regard to trauma-informed care. So collaborating with occupational therapists and other trauma-informed expert staff members, along with administration and policymakers to really integrate trauma-informed care into the day-to-day function of the facility itself. Additionally, this would include building sustainable and adaptable trainings in collaboration with central offices and these experts, and as well as making sure that those trainings are adaptable and consistently utilized in all of their year-to-year in-services. Additionally, building a culture and a sense of support around the use of trauma-informed care from individual line staff and supervisors all the way up to administration, really creating this atmosphere that trauma-informed care is really important and it really meets the needs of the facility's missions and values and really improves safety overall for everyone involved. So I was able to provide those recommendations, but I was also able to provide some resources that staff could utilize immediately in terms of trauma-informed care. And those things looked like providing applicable evidence as it relates to their roles, providing preparatory activities that they could utilize in group settings or individuals or in the classroom that help self-regulation, and providing adaptations and modification ideas for the environment and for activities that they could utilize to be trauma informed in their lesson plans and as they're going through their day-to-day interactions with youth. So this was super helpful, I think, to staff to be able to employ all of these ideas pretty immediately and give them something tangible to walk away with. So that was my capstone in a nutshell. Some of the questions that you might be having would be, how are the two facilities that I served unique? And so as you can see here in this flow chart, the Ohio juvenile justice process is split into two steps. When a youth is arrested, they're initially brought into the county-based system where they are detained in a county-based detention facility, and they are simultaneously going through the county court systems and associated services. And then once this is done and they are sentenced, then they are either, they move on to step 2 here, and they are either sent back out into the community on release with ankle monitor or on parole and required to do treatment courses that way. Or they are put into placements through the Ohio Department of Youth Services. And so these placements could take the shape in a couple different ways. The first being alternative placements that are lower security, hopefully a little more treatment focused. And these are places like Buckeye Ranch, Pomegranate, things like that. And then if they are a little more violent in their offenses, or if they're higher risk for any number of reasons, or they've been in alternative placements before and those haven't quite worked out, then they can be put into correctional facilities, which is the highest security level. And there are 3 of those in Ohio, and I was at Circleville, one of those. So I was able to see both that initial stage where they're detained right after arrest and they're starting to experience the occupational deprivations that they're going to be going through, and they're dealing with all of the emotions as an adolescent, trying to sort out all of these things and regulate themselves in those initial stages. And then also seeing then after the sentencing, they're trying to get into a new routine and trying to engage in occupations while they are removed from their families and their communities and all of that, and trying to adjust to all of these things. And so I was able to really work on those base level self-regulation, sensory skills, but then also with some of the others work on, now that we've stabilized and gotten you able to maintain those lower brain functions, now we can work on those executive functioning skills. Now we can work on those higher level life skills that you need to be habilitated, and the things you need in your toolbox to go out and hopefully make safe choices and promote age appropriate occupational engagement. So seeing both ends of that was really important for me. Additionally, you might be wondering how trauma-informed care is unique to these settings, and it is. You must meet the conflicting needs of security and treatment. And so most policies and day-to-day proceedings are done with security in the forefront of all of that, especially in the correctional facilities and detention facilities, as opposed to alternative placements or community. So security is a huge, huge driving factor of everything that happens, and treatment kind of takes a backfall to that oftentimes with some. And so to really balance those out, trauma-informed care could be really successful in meeting both of those needs, making the youth feel safe and connected, but also making sure that everybody in the facility is safe as well and security is maintained. So those are difficult lines to walk. Additionally, policies and politics are huge in how the facilities are run on a day-to-day basis, all the way from the top down to the most minute interactions. And so it's really important that occupational therapists and other trauma-informed care advocates are really getting in there and talking to administration and advocating with policymakers to make this change, because it is much bigger than just the treatment that you're doing. It has to go facility-wide, and it has to go across the board to be consistent. And so this is a big change that needs to be made, and it is not a light feat. In addition, individuals who are working day to day most frequently with these youth, like officers, are not trained in trauma informed care very well. They might have a little bit of it when they're first onboarding, but they are not extensively trained in behavior and psychology and things like that. They know use of force principles and restraint principles and things to try to minimize seclusions and restraints. However, they're not fully informed on how trauma impacts the brain and the body and behavior. And so they're not really sure how to integrate all of that into their daily interactions if they don't have the training. So that's definitely a challenge as well. Additionally, you might be wondering how trauma-informed care can increase safety, habilitation, and occupational performance, as I've been kind of overarchingly talking about here. And if trauma-informed care is used correctly, it can make youth feel safe and connected so that they can stabilize those lower-level brain functions. So they're not in fight or flight all the time, watching their back every second, and they're not in this emotional distress stage. And so once those are stabilized, then they can look into those executive functioning stages of the brain and start to develop those self-regulation skills and life skills that they need to provide habilitation to themselves and to engage in age appropriate occupations and maximize their safe decision making and things like that. So it is definitely unique, and if done correctly and facility wide, could make a very huge impact. But as I said, there's a lot of working parts here, there's a lot of components, and there's a lot of advocacy and change that needs to be done in order to make facilities fully trauma informed. So I appreciate you listening. Thank you so much, and I appreciate it.